Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today we'll discuss about how we can make HTTP API call to an externally available API. So for this purpose we'll use request create, and it has two dependency, Tokio and serde. Before we start writing the code, we have to add those dependencies in our cargo.toml file. So we have added request, Tokio, serde and serde.json. And I checked in all this code along with this cargo.toml file to my GitHub repository. The description I'll provide in the link below. So you can refer for the exact configuration or attribute thing. So now let's get started. So I'm using JSON placeholder mock API, which will return some dummy data. This is the fast way how we can make an API call using request library or request create. This has two modes. One is blocking API call, another one is asynchronous API call. Today we'll mostly explore asynchronous way, which is because that is most popular one. But if you are making a single request call or you are not doing some more concurrent processing, then you are good to go with a blocking call. So this will run in one thread and it will block the execution. But for simple script and simple use cases, this blocking request call is fine to use. So you could have use and import request and blocking if you choose so. It has its convenience method get, and there is an alternative way where it give more customization to provide more option. But this get is a helper utility where we can pass this URL, and this URL will return a list of JSON. If you call this URL, it will return list of posts in JSON format. We'll see in a minute. And usually this get call will return a result. The result enum. So as you aware, result contain two data. One is OK with payload and error with payload. If this call is failed, it will throw some error. And if it succeed, it will return some data. So we have used unwrap. Unwrap, it will return the response if it is successful. Or if it is failed, it will return a panic. So in your real world scenario, panicking or using unwrap is not very recommended approach. So you should use pattern matching and do some proper error handling to consider for the error scenarios. But because this is a simple example demonstration, so I will be using unwrap. Unwrap will panic in case of exception. But you should do a proper error handling in your case. So response had lots of other methods provided by this request create. We'll explore one by one. But first of all, we're going to use copy to. Copy to will write this content of the response body, whatever is written by this API, to the writer, whatever we provided. In this case, we provided this std out. Std out, we want to write that response body to the std out. So whatever we receive as part of that API call will be written to that console. This is not very much useful in case of your real world programming, but for debugging purpose or you want to inspect what is returning on the wire, it is very helpful. So if you see in the right hand side, so I am using this cargo run in the watch mode. So here user ID, title, body. So these four attributes is being written and it is an array. Till 100 record it is returning. ID equal to 100. 1 to 100. So this is a more conventional way to access this body. So we can use response.text. In our case, we are dealing with JSON, so we'll explore how we can parse the JSON message in a while. But before that, let's assume that you are getting string data or with some textual information. So that data you can get access using response dot text, and this will return a result, because the API may return none. API may not return any content, but it may contain some content. So the same error handling scenario is applicable to here as well. So if you debug this post response, so all the string message is being displayed. So this may not be very helpful in case you want to do some JSON processing. It is much easier. I'll show you in a while. So there are two steps. One is to get the response, making this get API call. So this is where the get API call happened. And in this case, you are parsing this message. You are dealing with the body. So here, if you want to retrieve this JSON, you can do response.json. Or if you want to get the bytes, you can do response.bytes. And there are different ways you can do. You can extract the body content. But instead of body, if you want to explore the response, so let's see how it looks like. So response has mostly three parts. One is URL and status and headers. So these URLs talk about HTTPS, domain name, and the path, and some query parameter and other information. And status code will be very much helpful. 200 status code is usually okay, or a success message. So if you get 401, then authentication failure. So depending upon the status code, you can handle the different condition. And headers, for example, content type, connection, and there are so many different header you can access. This is the response body in a nutshell. So if you want to access this URL block, you can do the response.url. So only the URL will be written. And if you want to access this host name, so you can go to any nested label and access those property whatever you are interested in. So URL is returning this, and host is only part domain thing. And there is some helper functionality available if you want to access only the string part also. Now if you want to access status, you can call status function, and headers is headers function. So all the helper utilities available. So this status will return 200 and headers will return all bunch of headers. So this is the header. If you want to retrieve this, content type, you can get it. Let me just comment it out as well. So if you notice over here, there are two ways you can access. One is using like index square bracket notation and pass this header key. So you can get that, headers. Or you can do get content type. So the problem with this headers is that if the header doesn't exist, then your program will panic. Then it is not a better way to do that. If you see this message panic, if the keys doesn't exist. But if the key doesn't exist in case of get call, then you will return the none. Because get is usually written this option. Option contain two values, some and none. So none. So you can have an opportunity to do the better error handling. And there are some other properties like remote address, etc. You can use it as well. You will get this IP address of a remote host and this port number. This is running in HTTPS. if you are dealing with many REST API calls, and if you want to run in a server environment where you are getting thousands of requests per second, then it makes sense to use asynchronous methodology, which is quite popular in most of the programming language these days. So asynchronous processing is very good for call where you are waiting for somewhere to get the response. So your thread won't be blocking, or your thread won't be waiting. So to make async call, because it's async and await keyword, this is the concept is available inside Rust programming language. So this is a standard by Rust, but by itself Rust is not able to execute the async code. It needs a runtime, because Rust by itself doesn't contain with any runtime availability. If you want to use async or await functionality, you have to use some kind of external library such as Tokio. Tokio is one of the most popular library available, which provide this asynchronous runtime. And it is very much helpful if you're dealing with lots of HTTP call which needs to be run concurrently. And request create, what we are dealing with for making all this HTTP call asynchronously. It leverages this async await functionality, but it needs Tokio dependency for providing this runtime, because request doesn't come with the runtime itself. So you have to use this macro or attribute Tokio main, and you have to use async keyword before this main function. Then your main function will run in a async manner, and the Tokio will instantiate as asynchronous runtime for you. It will handle how to create asynchronous tasks and manage all the internal detail about it. I'll create in future more detailed video which will discuss more elaborately about Tokio. But today this much information is needed about the Tokio, and we'll mostly deal with the async code using the request library. So if you see the same code what we have used earlier, we have seen request : blocking dot get, and this is exactly same. We don't need to use blocking, but here we have to use await before unwrap. So it will make this asynchronous code. So this code, whenever this get call will be fired, so the thread won't wait for that to complete. So whenever this request call is completed, then it will automatically poll it, and this message will be triggered. So this is like asynchronous processing. It is sometimes you'll get lots of performance benefit if you use this methodology, but your code will get slightly complicated if you are using this async methodology. So request, get, this is the URL, and await. Await is the keyword you have to use for async, and await, if you use await, you have to use async along with this Tokio runtime. And because this response contains this JSON data, we can access this JSON data using response.json. And whenever you're dealing with payload, because payload processing is also very heavy, the conversion from the string to JSON will take some time. So here also it is happen in a asynchronous manner, and you have to use await. So when to use await, bit slightly confusing for the beginning, but once you started using, you will know when to use it. So when you do the get call, you have to use await, and whenever you are fetching this body, you have to use await. The rest are same. And here you have to explicitly mention this type. If you see this serde JSON, we have added a dependency. This is a sub-project of serde. Serde is used for serialization and deserialization. But serde JSON is a kind of loosely typed JSON container kind of thing. Because if you know the Rust is a strongly typed, so we must need to define like which are the value is returning, but we have not defined any structure as of now. We don't know what is we are getting it from this API call, like body, title, and so on. So for making any to accept any kind of data from the API call, we can use like array response.json, and here in this type we have to mention like serde JSON value. Value is a kind of container which can contain any kind of data which is returning from API. This is very loosely coupled. So if you are not, if you're using a simple script as a thing, you no need to define like entire structure. Then you can use like serde JSON value. So if you want to print this, so which will return an array, this array with the object tuple with the payload. And if you see this, it is containing a pair of data body and the string annotation also it is using string number, and etc. Okay. So this is the container format. We have not defined like body ID, title, user ID can be changed, anything can be of any type. So if you want to access like individual property, like if you want to access like 10th index post, because the post itself is an array. So this will return this individual post, whatever you are interested in. If you want to access only body, then you can access using, you know, array index body. Or you can, if you want to convert to a string, then only the string data will be coming. So depending upon the type, string, number, etc. So if you see this, the string along with the tuple is being written. In this case, only if you want to access body. But if you want to access the raw content inside it, you have to use as stir. So it will return only the string literal. Or if you want to return this number, it's only. So you can do as I64. So depending upon your type, what you are dealing with, you can use as I64 or as a star. And this is again will return a option. Here we are unwrapping. If there is no data, it will panic. But if there is data, it will get this payload. Now we have seen like container one. Now very interesting thing we will see, like serde is a one extremely useful library. I will create a different dedicated tutorial to explore more detail about serde. But serde is used for serialization and deserialization with our Rust structure or Rust struct. We have to define a struct where we will specify like all individual property like ID, body, title, and etc. And serde is helpful to converting from API response, whatever the JSON we receive, that JSON serde will be deserialized to our struct, Rust struct. And whenever we want to pass to this API, so it will do serialization. Means it will convert this, the conversion from struct to the JSON format is known as serialization, and converting back from JSON to the struct, Rust struct is known as deserialization. So the first step we have to import, deserialize and serialize both the functionality. This is trait, both the trait. So we define a structure like with this for attribute with post, which mirror what API is going to return. And we use the derive macro and provide a debug if you want to print it and deserialize it. So deserialize we need initially because whatever the API is written in the post, the JSON to convert to this structure. So we need this deserialize attribute. So here the interesting part happened. Again, same the response JSON, and this part doesn't change. So we are accessing response.json. But in this type, we have to explicitly mention it is a vector because it is not returning as an individual field. If it is returning individual field, we could have used only post. Because this response is returning a list of posts, so we have to use vector. So vector post. So if you try to print it, This time it won't come that object notation, whatever we see generic previously. It will return that clearly defined post. This post is abstract. So here it is strongly typed. And once you get in post, you can do looping using for in loop. And you can access individual attribute like using dot operator, dot id and title and etc. If you are dealing with optional attribute, because these all are mandatory now, if you are going to deal with the optional attribute, you could wrap using the option string. If the mandatory, you can leave as it is, but rest you can make it option, so that if there is no data is coming, then you can get none and you can do proper error handling. So using for loop, we can get this in the data like ID and title. So whatever the information you want to fetch from this API call, you can get that information handy. Till now we have seen how we can make a get call and deserialize into the Rust struct. Now we'll try to create a post using post call. So similar to request has a helper method, helper functionality like get, but for post we have to use slightly different way. So there are different way how we can construct that payload. We'll see one by one. The first approach would be to use hashmap. Hashmap is a key value pair, which we can construct like this is a loosely type. So whichever that field we want to send, like body, title, and we can put into the map and we can send it across. But because we are using hashmap now, it is complaining not found in the scope. That means we have to import this before we use it. So I use from standard library collection and hashmap. Now also it is complaining type annotation needed. By default, once you declare initialize, we doesn't know about which type the data we are going to store. So either we have to explicitly mention the type here, or once we put one first element, then it will infer the type what is needed for this hashmap. Now we are passing like user ID value and ID, title, body. I don't think ID is needed. The ID will be auto-generated. So we are giving user ID, title and body. So for the JSON and this hashmap option, there is a little bit restriction, because this hashmap approach, this key and value can't be different from each individual field. So they must be same. So both key value pair, in this case we have to mark as a string. So this will work exactly because that mock API is not very tightly coupled and doesn't care about string and number in this particular case. And in JSON also both string number there is slightly different, but in the hashmap they don't differentiate between string and number here. Anyway, this is the hashmap we created and we populated key value, and whatever the name and you want to provide, it won't do any kind of validation. So it is very loosely typed, this approach. So for making any post call, we have to use slightly different manner. We have to first initialize with the client, request client new. So it will create an instance of client type. And using this client, we can call post. So similar to post, we can do patch, put, delete, and all this get. So using client, we can make any HTTP call, whatever you desire. And you have to pass like string literal, the post URL, whatever the API you want to make a post call. And this is the request body. Inside JSON, you want to, we are providing this hashmap. So this inside this body we can send different format. I'll show you the example. But in this request, you have to provide some format where this request library knows how to convert to a JSON body, JSON request payload. So in this particular example, we are passing hashmap, and request will convert this hashmap to the JSON format. So the deserialization, it will be taken care by request, and we are not using serde at this example because hashmap to JSON, it is handled by request now. And this is a send function. The API call is being sent, and here we are doing await and unwrap. So our post call happened. So if it is failed, it will panic, or we can do, I would highly recommend to do better error handling instead of doing unwrap, but that is a different out of the scope of today's videos. So we can debug this response. So same as earlier, like URL, status, header. If you notice, the status is changed. 200 for OK and success, but 201 is for created. Because in this call, we are making a post call to this API, and we are creating a new resource here. But if you print this response, the body is not getting displayed. So for getting body displayed, we have to do some other way. So we can do response.json, await and unwrap. So we can cast this to post. But this is complaint. Let's see what is the error. Invalid type, string, and expected I32. Maybe some of the field, whatever we are using is I32. Maybe this user ID, they're sending a string, but we are put it I32. But let's see how, let's see some different way to pass this message, and we'll come back to again later. So instead of using this post, we could have used a serde JSON value. This value container will, is not tightly, doesn't check what type you are sending, because it ignores that it doesn't have any relation with the post structure what we created. So it had its own container type. So if you see this 101, so the new record is created, new post, title foo and body bar, whatever we given here, foo bar. But if you see here that other thing, like, I was talking about, user ID is I32 we have defined, but user ID is returning by API is string. So the string number depending upon the JSON payload. So the serde is creating this structure and providing its own type. This string and number are the serde type, not type by, this is not type governed by Rust. So we have to convert into Rust type. So to make both are compatible, if you change the user ID to string, then it will work. The previous API call, this one. I made a string. So if you see, the error is gone, and we can cast response.json to our own struct post. So it is like user ID is 101 foo bar. So we can access using post.id and title and all the Rust approach you can use it. So all the ownership borrowing concept will be applicable to the post. Now serde JSON is providing a JSON macro. This JSON macro. If you don't want to use this hashmap approach, you could create like, JSON macro, and you can create like key value pair. in this format. This seems to be a bit simpler and simple to use. The user ID, title and body. So here user ID 1000 and foobar is getting printed. Because I am using the same variable, this is known as variable shadowing concept. So in a real world program, we could use one approach, but this would be take precedence. And this post map, I have not changed anything else. So this client call will remain same. So this JSON can take like hashmap and serde JSON type as well. But it is both approaches are not strongly typed. So if you want to use strongly type one, so you could have instantiate like post, and you can populate like user ID and title body values. Instead of post, if you post map name. So here there is no change, but it is still complaining. It didn't complain whenever we giving this hash map and set the JSON one. But whenever we try to use like our post object, our struct, it started complaining. So the error is talking about the trait bound serialize is not satisfied. The trait serialize is not implemented for post. So it's saying that it doesn't know how it can convert the post to the JSON. The converting from struct to JSON in a serialize. And if you see that example, so here we have given deserialize, now we have provided serialize. This is like an attribute we can add, and the error is gone. And if you want, so that error is gone. So now it is able to serialize and able to do the same call, and we can be able to print this request. And this is like additional thing I want to talk about. If you want to provide some custom header attribute, this is a request attribute you want to provide. This is not the response header. While sending the HTTP call, there are lots of header available. So you want to provide like content type, all the standard headers are you can able to access using this header module. So application JSON. So now it won't change any of our behavior, but it is an ability to override the default header. And if you want to do some kind of auth call also, you can use authorization and BRA token. So that also you can provide. So all the string you can construct using the format macro. So you can construct and you can use it. So this message is getting displayed here. So you can able to not only provide like request in a hashmap format, serde JSON format, and a strongly typed post struct. Also you can provide some header information also. Now instead of JSON, if you want to use the HTML form, the HTML form consists of like key value pairs. So it supports this form encoding as well, form type also submission, post call. So here you have to pass like ampersand array of tuples, and each tuple contains key value pairs. So this will also post the request to the server and make this API call, and there won't be any change. If you change the data title to hello here, so it in the right hand side it will be reflected. Here you see hello. So this was for today. Hope you learned something for this video. Have a good day ahead. Bye bye.